So this is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air for the first time with Carina Gardner, CEO of Design Suite and a fabric and craft designer. Welcome to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
So good. Thanks so much for having me.
So I want to let people know a couple of things. Like if you can see up there, there's an icon that says listen on Newsly. We are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. And for all the people watching or listening, if you use coupon code GHOST, you can check that out for 30 days for free. We'll be on Newsly later today, so you can check that out. No cost to you if you use the coupon code GHOST. And then we've got your link up. We've got a couple of links. So we have the first one is designsweetcourses.com/free. And then we've got this other one that we have, Carina Gardner shop.myspotify.com, shopify.com. So we can alternate between those during the show.
Yeah.
And then other than that, we want to talk about the focus is like from hobby to profitable creative business. That's kind of like the focus of the story, and we'll get into it. But again, thank you for being on the show.
I'm so excited to be here.
So one of the first things we always ask guests, is a new thing we've been doing lately, is like what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Well, I am currently the CEO of Design Suite, but 3 years ago, I was just a designer and I was a multiple six-figure designer. There's a few of us out there that make a lot of money as designers. And I kept getting hounded because people were like, we don't understand how you're making so much money as a designer. So I started a program to teach people the way to make money. And just as a background, I actually have a doctorate in design. So I taught at the University of Minnesota. I taught at the Arts Institute. I taught graphic design. My specialty was typography and packaging design. That's mostly what I taught at those schools. And so I have a little bit of an academic background already, but that wasn't the thing that made me successful at design. The thing that made me successful was business practices, understanding how to market my stuff, understanding how to use platforms, and how to get licensing deals. And so I kind of like put all of that into a program and started doing that. And I will tell you, in my career as a designer, most definitely the thing that's motivating me, just sheer creativity, like doing what I want to do, loving it, loving the process, designing new things, like the excitement of like that temporary satisfaction of having like a product made, which is incredible. I love it so much. Now, as CEO of a program, it's had to shift a little. I don't get to design my own products every day like I used to. And instead, a lot of the motivation comes from the members when I see them winning, when I see them making money, when they're like, this has completely changed my life. I'm like, okay, I was on the right path. Once in a while I question it because I'm like, man, I wish I was designing fabric right now. But for the most part, it's been so much more motivating to watch them win because I'm like, oh, this knowledge is transferable. Like people can do exactly what I did and make money.
So you kind of went from, being your own, designing your own stuff to being more like a teacher, or like, if you think about a music producer, we don't write our own song. We're writing songs for other people to show how to get out there and hit their mark. But it's more about lifting other boats.
It's so true.
Yeah.
And it's way more exciting than I thought it was going to be, if I'm going to be honest. Like, I knew I could help a few people. I was like, hey, if you just do these things I'm telling you to do, like you can make money. Okay. And then a year or two into it, like people really started making money and like a lot of money. And I was just like, oh, snap, this really works. Like, because, when you first start something, you're not sure, especially like for you. I mean, like you come from the music world, you put a song out and you're like, yeah, I don't know how well it's going to do, but you start putting more songs out and you kind of start seeing, oh, like this has an audience, this has a demographic. Same with design. It takes a little bit of time of producing design work to find the right audience to hit it.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. It's like the creative process. There's some level of vulnerability when you first start, right? Because you're not sure. Yeah. You're not sure if you should present. And then when you're an artist, a lot of times if you're doing something that really is breaking the mold, the initial feedback might be just like, well, I never seen that before. I don't know if that's going to work, rather than tweaking something that really already works.
Yeah,
So
it's
a lot of
true.
times, if you're on the kind of bleeding edge, you get hit with a lot of criticism. Is like, why are you doing that? Why are you presenting that? That's not the standard form. Like in jazz, Miles Davis went from bebop to fusion, and then people say, well, what's that? Because bebop is the standard. Fusion's not, that's not the standard. So why are you doing that? So,
And don't you think there's some vulnerability in that? Because but when you do that, then you do have to deal with all the criticism, people who don't like it. But then there's also the wins in that, right? Like the people who are like, that's amazing, that's cool. But it's so hard because that negative feedback really, it strikes you as an individual because people don't pay attention to the fact that you're really a regular human being.
well, it affects you, because I think a lot of people, well, you have to kind of build a little bit of an armor. Like when you start to work in a creative way, and people say they hate it, it's like a little, you take it personal. And then when you learn to kind of separate, because I do, like, my day job is I'm a designer, a software designer. So like, when I'm doing that, like, I don't own the code. The company owns the code. But if somebody goes and says, something I did 10 years ago, that's thing, well, that was what was 10 years ago. I don't own, I mean, the technology shifts so much. It's like, you can say you hate it now, but you didn't understand that's where we were. But then people take it personal. So I've run into situations where you get people like, they think it's their baby. Well, they really don't own it, because the company owns it, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times you have to kind of get beyond it and say, well, are you going to take everything personal, and then they get really frustrated, or kind of have lessons learned and get better?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And, it's one of the things we do in design school, right? One of the things is building that armor or building a little bit of a wall so that you're separate from your design work. Because if you think everything is your baby, then it's going to hurt all the time, right? Because nothing's going to be perfect. Nothing's going to feel, I mean, I have children, you have a child, like they're not perfect, right? So it's just not going to be perfect. And so if you stop thinking of every piece of your work being your baby, and instead it's work and it's an extension of me, but it's not really a part of my being, then it stops being as personal.
But I think is part of it is, like, you talked about the passion. Like, you created a business from your passion, so you're kind of emotionally invested. So you have to kind of be aware, and situational awareness of how much of that passion is going to be affected by, feedback.
It's true. I think it's an interesting thing because I think there are business owners who create businesses because they're great business owners. And then I think there's quite a few of us who are practitioners who created businesses because we were just so darn good at the thing that we did, right? And that's what happened to me. It stemmed from the thing that I did so well. We went about teaching other people to do. And that's why it's believable and it's authentic, because I'm teaching from actual experience.
Yeah.
And so that makes it really nice. The opposite side of it, though, is that I didn't come into it going, I'm going to be the CEO of a company. In fact, a couple of years ago, when I really took on that role and I started having a bigger team and I was working with people, I realized oh my gosh, I don't know if I own this name CEO. I was a creative director of a scrapbooking company for a long time. I took the name president with our company, Mini Lou, when I ran that. And that was a coloring book and paper doll company. And we did deals with Nordstrom and 500 independent stores, lots of amazing museums. And it's so crazy because then I got into this role for Design Suite as CEO, and it took me a little while to just really sit in it, to be okay, this is the role I'm taking right now, and I need to stop just telling everyone I'm a designer. I'm actually the CEO of a company, but it was a struggle. So this practitioner to business owner is a very interesting thing.
I think sometimes, you when you kind of fall into it, or you didn't expect it. There's some people, they say right out of business school, I want to be a CEO. Right?
Yes.
They're directed to do that, and then they find it really hard. And then what you find is there's a lot of situations where some people, like entrepreneurs or artists or designers, they kind of go on a path, and then it makes sense to actually be the CEO, to become the CFO. And it may have not been their plan. And then the people who plan it are like, well, how did that happen? Because I've got this business plan and I'm in the MBA and I have all these things and I didn't hit it. And this person that wasn't even planning on it hit it. But it's like, this opportunity knocks and you pick it up. And sometimes it's really aligned.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes like the alignment happens and it's not, what people would have expected, right? They say, oh, that designer became the executive, the recording engineer becomes the CEO of the record company.
Yeah.
They're an engineer. Like, why did they think they get to be that? But they got to be that because there's something they knew that was valuable in that role. And it makes sense for them to be in that role.
Yeah. It's been a very interesting thing. I always tell everyone when I'm done with this, I'll still always be a designer, right? Like that's where my passion lies. I love being a designer. If you're seeing the show that we're doing right now, you can see my last fabric line is behind me. I'm pretty well known as a die cut designer for Silhouette and did some stuff with Michaels, and I just love making and building things. But I also think that's where the authenticity comes through, because like I love it so much. It's really easy to hand that over to my designers who I work with, because they're all like, seeing me make stuff and being excited about it. And they're super excited too. They're like, I can't wait to make stuff,
Yeah, it's there's an example like in the automotive industry, there was like this trend of bringing in people that weren't engineers from other industries. Like somebody comes in from retail, right? It has nothing to do with engineering at all. And they come in, they take over like an auto company. And yeah, maybe they can sell widgets. They're good at that. But a lot of times the tradition was like, the engineer becomes the CEO because the engineer kind of knows the design of the cars, right? And kind of can get excited with the new designs rather than maybe cutting the cost on the designs, but actually getting excited about certain things. And I think sometimes having that passion about what you do and the connection to what you do, it makes sense for you to be a leader, because then you can communicate in a way where it's not just like, oh, this skill is transferable from this other industry. And maybe it can be, but I think there's like having that direct connection, I think is valuable.
Yeah. I've really loved it once I kind of settled into it. And it's so funny because it's the exact same things I have to teach my designers. So I get a lot of crafters and surface pattern designers, people who are like crafty and they make stuff, but they don't encompass the role of designer. Like even though they're designing, they're working in Adobe Illustrator, they're working in Procreate, they're making stuff and they're selling it. They refuse to tell people they're a designer. And so it's so funny because when I ran into that, because they're kind of having identity issues, we started talking really a lot about that. And can I tell a story really quick about something that happened with one of my design? So I was 6 months into the program, and I had a designer who came to me and she was like, Carina, I'm not a designer. And I said, okay, well, let's talk about this for a little bit. Are you a quilter? And I knew for a fact she would say yes to this because she sews. And she was like, well, yeah. And I was like, well, but like, how do you know you're a quilter? And she said, well, I sew every day. I'm quilting every day. I'm an ambassador for Bernina. I do all this stuff. And I was like, okay, so you know you're a quilter because you sew every day. She said, yeah. And I said, okay, do you know you are a parent? Like, do you feel like you're a parent? And she was like, well, yeah. And I happen to know she has 6 children. And I was like, well, why do you know that? And she was like, well, because I parent every day. I'm a mom every day. I have kids around me every day. And I was like, oh, interesting. I was like, do you design every day? And she was like, I was like, is that a no? And she was like, yeah. And I said, the best indicator of identity is the activities we do
What you do.
every day.
Yeah.
And so that, I think that hit hard. This is a story I tell in my design boot camps all the time. And the number one thing that I tell a designer is that if you don't feel like a designer, simply design every single day. The more you design, the more you will embrace that identity. If you don't want the word designer, if you want artist, do what an artist would do. If you want creative, just do creative stuff every day. You will embrace it. And then the more you can use that language when you go out to a party or you meet with friends. If I go to a new party and I hang out with people, I struggle with this, but now I say, oh, I'm the CEO or I'm the founder of a design program. But I used to always say, oh, I'm
Designer.
a fabric and craft designer. And that's what I tell people, all my designers to say. I was like, say that, because sometimes they won't say that. They'll say, oh, I'm a stay-at-home mom. And I'm like, but you freaking make money as a designer. And they're like, I know. Say, I'm a design, I'm a paper designer. And the reason you have to do that, there's two reasons. One is it instills it in us when we say it out loud, right? And then the second reason is actually far more important, but people don't realize it. Most of the jobs that get handed around in the design industry is all word of mouth. And it's by simply saying, I am a designer, that the person you're talking to probably has a sister, a brother, a CEO they know that needs a designer for something. This is how all the jobs in
Connection.
all those networking connections, that is how they all happen. I can tell you, we have multiple designers who have made a lot of money in our program by simply learning this one little trick of telling people they're a designer.
What's interesting is like when I work with life coaches and therapists, what they find a lot of creative people have a problem with is like imposter syndrome. They have a lot of problems with limiting beliefs. So they could, all their life they've been an artist, but then they deny it. So then when they're at that party, they won't say it. Like you said, if they don't say it, then they won't get the opportunity. It's kind of like this idea of the law of attraction, right? So if you let people know you're a creative, you're going to get pulled into the creative sphere, and you're going to get in that environment, and you're probably going to get opportunities. But if you deny what you are, then nobody's going to know what you are because you're hiding, and then
so true.
it's not going to happen.
It's like an endless cycle. And I think that law of attraction is actually a really good way to put it, because it's like what you put out in the universe does come back to you, however you think of it. But it's also our words and the way we behave, right? When we send out positive things, a lot of positive things come back to us. When we send out what we are and what we think we are, guess what? It like starts to instill in us. It's not fakery. It's just simply instilling to us what we've already known we were.
Well, I think it's authenticity, because I think when you're willing to be vulnerable and then put work out and then to actually show the work is uniquely yours and that you have a talent, you're willing to share it. That sharing breeds opportunity. It's like the idea, like podcasting. Like the day you do your podcast, the first episode, you might make mistakes. You might not be the best in the world. But as you do it more, as you show up, then suddenly you get opportunities. Like people see your show, then other people recommend your show, and then you get known as a podcaster. So then people come to you and you're constantly doing shows and you're getting booking with no problem because you're identifying yourself. What are you? A podcaster. So I should be able to podcast. So I should be able to get guests. It's like the same idea. It's the law of attraction that your guests come to you.
Yeah.
The opportunities come to you because you're putting yourself out there.
I really liked how optimistic you were there, though, with like your first podcast, you'll make a few mistakes. I'm like, I think we just hit 400 on our podcast. And I was just like, and I still make mistakes. And you know what I've decided is people like it. I think people don't mind. Maybe those of you guys listening here, you're going to hear me say, and cough or whatever. And at the end of the day, it's because we're regular human beings and we just happen to be talking on a platform, right? But we're real regular people just having a chat here. And I still make so many mistakes on my YouTube channel, on my podcast channel, on my stories. I just make a lot of mistakes. And I've just decided, you know what, if people don't like it, then they're looking for a movie star or someone super polished.
Well, that's the thing is I try to explain to people, some of the reasons why I do live podcasting. But there's a lot of people that feel that you should do very polished, highly edited with music behind it and all kinds of graphics and applause coming in, all these things. They're highly produced, right? And I felt like, okay, I tried it. I said, well, that's not me because it didn't feel right. It didn't feel comfortable. And then what I found is like, I'm like an improvisational musician. And I said, well, that's my talent. So I figured, why don't I bring that to podcast? And the idea, like, I don't have to edit the ums out. I don't have to make it exactly perfect because, like, it's in the present moment kind of flow state situation. And I think people appreciate that compared to like an infomercial or something that's like, done with actors. They're trying to act like they're not actors, right? So when you're dealing with actual real people, like their real lives, and you're telling that human story, there's something about that that is a lot of people get drawn into it because of the honesty, because the authenticity and the vulnerability and the stories are unique. And so that in itself to me is the reason why I do it, because I like that not knowing what it's going to be. And
I'm
some people
so
fear that,
impressed that you do
but I
this. If
don't.
you did this live with like music, that freaks me out. But I mean, you're an amazing musician, I'm assuming, or you wouldn't do that. I don't mind doing it speaking live. I don't know if I would love designing live for people to see. That might kind of freak me out, but
Oh, that might be
that's
hard.
interesting. Yeah, it is. It's very interesting. I wouldn't mind putting together a craft. Like today, this is for a summit I'm doing. This is a pop-up card. And so I
Oh,
crafted
wow.
it, and we had to have multiple videos, from above and to the side.
Oh,
But
what you're doing
I wouldn't mind
today.
putting this together live, but designing live, there's like a process for design. And maybe that's the case too with composing music to some degree, where I have like my own process of going through kind of figuring
Yeah.
what something's going to be until I hit that thing. I feel like I don't want anyone to see that. That's an
Yeah.
interesting thing I hadn't noticed about myself, but yeah.
That's interesting because there are people that like to film that. I mean, they're filmmakers that will go and try to get a band while they're writing the album.
Mm.
And then they sometimes they get a lot of pushback because there's like that secret sauce thing where they don't want to show how that happens. They want to show there's like some mystery, some magic. And other people will say, well, I want to kind of capture that. And so there's like kind of dichotomy between like the filmmaker and the artist is like, I want to try to capture you at your moment of creation. And we're like, I don't know
Mhm.
if I want you to do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind someone capturing it. For me, it's the feeling like I'm on camera and versus me just kind of being in my space. Because I will tell you, when my best design work happens when I'm in my pajamas with my hair in a bun, with no makeup on, probably eating a slice of pizza, like just totally a mess.
Yeah.
And I don't mind people seeing the mess necessarily, because I actually think that's actually a very honest way to be.
Mhm.
But like sometimes like it takes me a while to hit my stride in a design. Like if I'm not doing what I call production design work, where I'm doing like high volume, like I just designed a new line for my company, Riley. That's who I designed for, Riley Blake. I did it over a weekend, and I did it over a 24-hour period. And when I did it, like it was really messy. Like I think if someone saw it, they'd be like, I do not understand what she's doing. Because I'd be like, I draw one thing, I go throw it to the side, I go draw something else, I throw it to the
Yeah.
side, draw something else, throw it to the side. And then I'd have to walk away from it for a little while and then come back to it and be like, okay, I think this piece works and this piece works and this piece works, but I don't know if all of them work. And then something else gets thrown out. So it's such a messy process to me.
Yeah.
And teaching ends up actually being a very clean, chronological process. And so it's a very interesting dichotomy in what I do and what I try to teach people to do, but also telling them like, oh, this is kind of messy. Like the way you
Yeah.
get there is a little bit
Yeah.
messy.
But sometimes it's not linear. And the problem with a lot of teaching methods is it wants to be sequential.
Mhm.
But what I find that over time as an artist, a lot of things are not sequential. A lot
Yes.
of things are kind of haphazard. They are kind of, there was a famous thing where documentary we were talking to Frank Zappa. And Frank Zappa was like this somebody who he was doing a documentary on him, showed what he does. He would do live shows, he'd do tape shows, he'd do all these shows. He'd go to his house and he'd have all the tapes all over the floor in his living room. And he'd be bouncing around between the different ones, taking live tapes and mixing them with live things, doing the live performance with the tape, and just doing a lot of hodgepodge kind of in the moment. And basically he was honest and said, this is where my best work comes when I'm not thinking like linear, I'm kind of all over the place.
Mm,
And a lot of times if you teach people, they want to know that it's sequential, and a lot of times it's not.
it
And
isn't.
so, yeah, so it's kind of hard because like once you learn some basics, yeah, the basics can be taught sequentially. But when you
Yes.
start going into the practice, it
Yes.
kind of jumps, the timeline can jump all over the place.
Yeah, I do think that I was just thinking about my time teaching at the University of Minnesota because, for designers in particular, and I don't know if they do this for musicians as well, but you have like your base core foundational classes, right? And then you have your upper class stuff, like the stuff you're doing your junior year. And it's taking all the information you had from your foundational to like be able to put it into these junior classes. Then you have like a senior capstone project where you've got like portfolio and all of that. And I was just thinking about, so we do that, a little bit of that in our program. There's 17 courses, and we're right now in the middle of building them out to semester long. So they're pretty intensive and crazy. But we actually give everyone a different roadmap based on who they are. So they can maybe they're taking Illustrator for Beginners, Illustrator Academy, and Fabric Design Academy. Whereas someone over here might be starting at Silhouette Designer Masterclass, Illustrator Workarounds, and
more customized.
yeah. So like everyone's got a different road plan, but we make sure that no one's actually on the same road plan. And there's very few people who are on the same road plan because based on what you want to create, it isn't linear. It's not as, I wish it were actually a little linear. It would sure make it easier to teach, right? But that's why we have 17 courses, because it's like you're going this roadmap, this person's going this roadmap, and you're going to have some stops along the way to try to make it happen.
Yeah, a lot of times there's like this kind of thing I've learned as an artist where you talk about the walk away, or the point where like I need silence before I start anything. Mm-hmm. I need to kind of not have a lot of noise. I need to kind of be with no inputs coming in, just some time to just be there with no music going on, no getting pinged, nobody sending me anything, just kind of quiet. Now, whether I do that by walking in the woods or meditating or something, just to kind of clear my head, then I'll get into it. And sometimes in the middle of something, I'll need to kind of break away because I'm too deep into it. And so I think that some people might want to just keep on, diminishing returns. Like if you keep on working 8 hours on the same thing, and then it's getting frustrating. So sometimes that's like the kind of trigger that like maybe you need to walk away.
Mm-hmm.
You need to get in space.
For big projects, for sure. I think, it's so funny because we teach our designers not to do big projects at the beginning. Like there are very few projects that should take more than an hour. Most should take, by the time they're done with us, like after the year, we expect things that took them 1 hour to do should take them 15, maybe 10 minutes to do, because the goal is to become fast, right? Mm-hmm. And to get really good at the craft. And so big projects, I know what you're talking about, because that's like a whole collection, right? For me, what would that be for you? Like a full score, possibly?
Like a full album versus a song.
Yes.
Like, depending on a song can take a year if you're that crazy about it, right? Mm-hmm. Like you could take 6 months on one song.
Yeah.
But some artists could be like, they could take 6 months to do the whole record. It's kind of who the artist is.
Yeah.
So sometimes, the big project, it's like the album or the EP versus a song or just a jingle. Mm-hmm. I'm doing a 30-second ad for a license versus a 5-minute song versus a 30-minute score for a video game. Mm-hmm. There's different levels of that project. Like the score in the film or the video game, and that's a big project.
Yeah. Well, so I'm super curious now, like, do you work well under a deadline?
Well, I think some artists don't. I mean, I write all the time. And so for me, writing a song is not hard. Some artists make it kind of a tortured thing where it can take a very long time for them to do like very little output. So it takes like 4 years to get a record. Mm-hmm. Well, I could do probably like 5 records in 1 year. Mm-hmm. So it just depends on if you're comfortable creating work and, and the quality still is there, no matter what the time is. It's like, it's just, to me, it's like a passion thing. If you're passionate about just creating art, it just happens. Where like, you don't, it's a different mindset. I don't have a problem with the deadlines because I can hit them.
Yeah. Interesting. As you talk to people and other creatives, do you find that is something people are good at in the creative space, or is it something that people struggle with? I'm just curious.
Well, I think like if you're a studio musician, you got to hit deadlines. Like, so if you're a certain type of musician, like you're working on projects and you have set deadlines. Mm-hmm. If you're more of an artist that like doesn't have that time deadline, then you can be very indulgent. So I've run into a lot of artists that are very indulgent about how long they work on something because they really don't have deadlines. Because they're just working on their own thing.
This
And
is the
so
same thing in design. It's exactly the same thing. And it's especially designers who are trying to build their own businesses, who that's who we mostly work with, because they don't have forced deadlines. They tend, I love the word indulgent. That is exactly what it is, where they kind of feel like they can like push a project out as long as they want. When the truth is, the faster and quicker you can end projects, the quicker your deadlines are. Like if you can have daily deadlines, you are far more likely to succeed and make a lot of money as a designer. I feel like that's the thing I'd love to emphasize to all of you as creatives. Like the best thing you can do for yourself is mandatory deadlines for yourself.
it's like, that's why people went to Barry Gordy, because Barry Gordy had a hit shop. He had training. He trained the guys how to present themselves, how to write the songs, how to hit, to go and take a song and run it through 4 different bands, 4 different ways, 4 different groups, perfect it, put it out, keep on putting out records, like having a deadline, because it was like a hit machine. And so
Yeah.
when you have that kind of structure where you are wanting to put singles out every week, you want to hit the radio every week with your artist to let people know you're there. So
And that
if you have
works.
that kind of, yeah, when you have that kind of machine, and then people say, well, like, how could that work? You're going to burn out, and sometimes it does, but the idea that the work ethic of it does get you into the point where like the musicians were like just like on top of it. They're so well practiced. They didn't have all this downtime. They really got good. They
Yeah.
really became like
That is
experts.
exactly the same in the design industry. It's the same way, actually, I think, across all creative fields. As I talk to other creatives, it's actually the more you produce, the more creative you get, because you've stretched yourself, right? Because the more you produce, the higher your volume, the more you can create, the more interesting your stuff becomes, right? Because you're pushing harder and harder and harder. I actually think the opposite happens. I think people who say, well, maybe you're going to burn out, I think those people haven't really dug into the true creative process, because a creative only wants to grow, not
Yeah.
limit.
Yeah. What usually happens, like you might burn out what you did before, right?
Yes.
That you might get tired of doing the same baseline. And so you'll evolve it because you got bored. And so what it tends to do is it leads to innovation. Like people, like you keep on doing the same hi-hat. Well, you're not going to want to keep on doing that because it's done 10 different songs. So you start changing it. You start getting better. You start creating new variations. And then that's an evolution. So what happens is you start to get evolutionary, increases in your capability. And so you see this with bands, like from the first Beatle album to like Sergeant Pepper Abbey Road, is like there's a massive progression in terms of what they were able to do from being like a boy band to being this art band. Like, how did that happen? Because they were doing the work.
Yeah, it's totally volume and time, which is something, actually, we haven't talked about it yet, but my new book that's coming out, well, just barely came out. It's called Make Art That Sells. We just do a formula in it because we want it to be super practical for people. But 2 of the components are volume and time. And all, like, people highly underestimate as a creative how much volume you have to put out in order to win, to make money, to do anything, right? It's like the number of podcast episodes, the number of YouTube videos, the number of Instagram posts, the number of designs, the number of songs you have to put out, far greater than you think it has to be in order to produce good stuff. And then secondly, it takes time to do that. So like I'll run into designers who will be like, well, I came out with 100 designs in 3 months. I'm like, well, just keep doing that. And they're like, why? And I'm like, because you haven't put enough time in. Like there isn't enough time. There might be the volume there, but I'm like, you need that volume further up. So do that now for 3 more months, and then 3 more months after that. Okay, now we're at a year and we have 400 designs. Now we're talking. Now where do we go from here? And so most designers, and I think most creatives, highly underestimate the amount of effort, time, and volume something takes to really make it.
Well, I think it's kind of like if you think about the athlete example, like the 10,000 hours to get the 3-point shot. You kind of have to get that to get the muscle memory, so you hit that all the time. And the same thing with a musician, to get the muscle memory so you go on stage and you know all those songs. It's the practice that you're doing. And then it's also what people don't understand, for every musician has a big catalog of stuff you've never heard.
Mm.
It's all those demos. You have like hundreds, if not thousands, of demos before anybody ever even knows that you're big, because that's the process you did to get to where you are. Now, not everybody sees it because it's messy, but that's the work you have to do. Like the 400 designs, you get the 100 demos, the 1,000 demos of what you did to get where you are. It's not usually 0 to 100. It's not overnight. It's usually a lot of work.
Man, wouldn't it be nice though if it were 0 to 100? I think all of us would be winning right now.
Yeah, it's just I think people underestimate the level of work, because they think, well, I'll put like one album out. It's like you might actually have put out 5 albums with the material to get to that one album.
Yeah, it's so true.
Right? To get to that one single, you might have 50 songs before you actually got to the song that's the single. And that's just the nature of the way things work.
Yeah. I think that's really hard for creatives to hear, because I think we want to feel like everything is like spontaneous, and like, I know for designers anyway, we kind of want everything to be like rainbows and unicorns and like butterflies are flying all around us. And it's like just spontaneous creativity. Sometimes we get a little bit like that. But it just really isn't, is it? Like most of the time it's scheduled time on my calendar to sit down, open up my computer, open up Illustrator. On my list today, it's design a shadow box card. I'm going to design a shadow box card, and it's just very kind of clear cut. It's not some magical thing. A lot of it is just muscle memory, like the thing that I do every day. And so it just feels easy and effortless over time.
Yeah, it's really that you got to show up, because I think the mistake that some creators do is like they think like they put the time in and then they take tons of time away from it, and then they lose their capability. So like a lot of times, like you kind of got to maintain that level of practice, and it's like, well, you do, because you lose it. Like, a lot of artists is like, if they take a lot of time off, they lose their chops, and then they got to build it back up. So if you're constant, if you can do something sustainably and incrementally, where you're kind of doing it on a regular basis, and you don't take these very long, like 2-year break, and you don't do anything, which I guess some people, that's how they want to operate. But like, I find that you kind of mess yourself up doing that.
I think you start over. It's like starting over again. It's kind of like I hate to say it, like a diet, but like you screw up so bad, you're like at square one again. We were just discussing this in my program because someone of my members had a family loss, which is a very big deal. And you do need to take some time off to grieve. She's dealing with all the affairs that, all the like death stuff. I mean, there's a lot of things involved. And I said, like, listen, here's the deal. This is what I want you to do. I was like, you need to walk away from design a little bit. Like you have to take care of this stuff. It's going to be hard, and you're grieving and it's tough. But I said, like, just do whatever the minimum is for you to keep going, because most people don't realize just even being able to do the minimum, even through hard things, will keep you still in a state of creativity. It will still continue to up level you, because people don't realize if you're not taking a couple of steps forwards, you're actually taking a couple of steps back, and you just don't realize it. So it's like, so it's kind of like you just want to be in maintenance stage, which means like if you can just do the minimum, which might mean only opening up the programs like twice a week. It might mean only making one product that week. It might mean designing one little thing that week. That's still progress, because that still keeps you going. It's the moment you walk away from it, I would say even for a month, that it gets really hard to jump back in again.
Yeah, because then you get into that paralysis of like getting back in, and it's kind of like trying to learn the horse again, and you lose it. You lose the skill set, and it's a lot of hard work, and it's like, why would you do that? And we got a lot of examples of musicians that take big long time off, and then they come back, and then they're like, well, they're not where they were in 74. 76,
totally.
They're not carrying themselves the way it is, because they lost part of it, and it's like, you can see it, and it's like, okay, but you gotta like, okay, well, that's where you are now. So I
think you have to know yourself, and you have to know human nature. I was just thinking, so every year or so I go off sugar and flour for like 2 or 3 months. Okay. This is like this thing I do. It's so stupid because I do it. It feels really hard. Then I feel really great for like 3 months. And then I accidentally, something happens, a celebration, a something, and I start having a little sugar again. And the next time it's time for me to get off sugar and flour again, it feels really hard. Like I'm like, I don't want to do it, but I know I should do it. I'll feel so much better. I'll get my energy back. And I do think like you have to know yourself because willpower, I don't think is an infinite thing. I think it's finite. There's a great book by uh, Daniel Pink called When. And he says your willpower by the end of the day, it's almost gone. Like he basically says you have a lot of it when you start your day. But think about especially early birds, people who can get a lot done. Like I can get a lot done between 6 a.m. and noon. Like, man, like
Yeah,
I
very
can like kill it. I can do like 10 days worth of design work during that time. The moment noon hits, and really for me, it's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
starts
It's
to
just
drop
like,
off. Yeah. You got to know yourself. Like if you know you're an early bird and all your stuff happens then if you set yourself up for failure by putting yourself like somehow you're going to do something at 3 o'clock. It's like, well, do you ever do that? Anything at 3 o'clock? Probably not. So it's like, you don't want to probably do that.
I know. We actually moved a lot of our meetings in my company around to that because I could do meetings. Like I could like meet with people, get our stuff done, know what was going to happen the next day. If I could do my deep work, is what I call it, in the mornings. And so we moved, and actually we did a couple of different crazy things. At the beginning of this year, well, we had annual meeting with my leadership team. And one of the big things I said to them is, how can we schedule no meetings on Wednesdays and Thursdays? I was like, can we have, so Tuesdays are our main design day. Like we meet with members that day. We have all kinds of things going on that day. Monday is like a lot of team meetings, trying to get everything sorted. And then Friday, it's like all the like leadership meetings, follow-up meetings. A lot of my podcasts happen on Friday. And I know we're doing this on a Wednesday, but notice it's in the afternoon. I don't know what time it is for you, but it's the afternoon for me. It's 4 o'clock. I'm like, I can do a podcast at 4 o'clock. That's not for me, it's not my deep work. My deep work is designing, writing copy, doing creative work. Like I want that in the morning where I'm really, really like, gung ho for it. And so we did this. And I can't tell you, just even having more of a fuller day that where all the creative stuff can happen in a single day, I accomplish so much more. Like it's insane how much more I can accomplish by just simply pulling everything. Like there's not allowed to be anything until noon on Wednesdays, on Thursdays, for sure. For me, it's
That's
been like,
interesting.
yeah.
Well, I think like in design work, like a lot of times we get pulled into a lot of management meetings.
Yes.
And then we kind of push back. It's like, if you want us to actually build the program, you got to give us time to build the program.
Yeah.
If you keep on putting us in for like 4-hour meetings every day, how are we going to build the program? So they got to give us some part of the week where we're all about design. And then there's other days you can stack that with meetings, but give us like a full spread of time so we can actually do the work.
Yeah.
And it's like, there was like, because a lot of times the managers, I want to put them down, but it's like, they don't do the work.
Yeah.
Right. So if they don't understand that I need to have a clear space to do the design, whether it's a computer program or writing a song, whatever, you need the kind of space to be able to do it.
Well, and longer blocks of time. That's the other thing that was so beautiful about this Wednesday, Thursday thing that I implemented in my company. So some of the people meet, like, so Lisa, who's our design suite lead, and Abby, who is she's our design suite assistant. The two of them work a lot together. So they will schedule working meetings together on Wednesdays and Thursdays, but the two of them are literally working together.
Yeah.
Like they're on their computers.
Application development. So
yeah, they're just sitting there working together. That is really different than having a meeting that's more managerial, like what's going on with this, what's going on with this, how are we doing this? And so those meetings are not allowed to happen except for on Mondays and Fridays. Tuesdays is Design Suite's program day. So we have a lot of program stuff going on where we're meeting with members and all of that. And I'm going to say, like, even we moved, like, we had our team meeting used to be really early in the morning. We moved it back to 10 a.m. So I could just spend the first 3 hours of my week sitting down and like really like thinking about like what needs to happen for the week and doing any
Mhm.
creative CEO work that I need to do, which is totally different than design work. Like
Yeah,
creative
yeah.
CEO work like bends my brain in a way that my design work doesn't. And so I think that's really important. And I don't think we give ourselves enough space to do that. And I mean, truly do it, because, you know, people put space on the calendar and they don't do anything with that stuff. Like that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like you literally sit down and you're like for 3 hours doing the creative work.
Well, I think sometimes some people feel like they gotta fill the calendar to show that they actually have an activity when they don't understand like the activity is actually the production
Yeah.
that it needs to happen. And if you overfill with too much micromanaging meetings that aren't productive, they're more like metric meetings. Rather, it's like, well, where are you? Like, okay, we keep on asking me where I am. You're not giving me time to actually get where I need to be.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
so
It's so
it's like,
true.
yeah, so it's like once you like, I think it's a level of trust. Like if you've got people that can do work, trust them to do the work, and then ask them where they are. If you give them a reasonable amount of time to do it, but if you keep on
Yes.
interrupting that flow, like the flow state doesn't work well if you're getting interrupted every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, it's like how are you going to do
Yeah,
that?
it's true. Do you work virtually or in an office for your day job out
My
of
day
curiosity?
job is I'm totally virtual. I
Mhm.
deal with teams all over the place, people in Canada, people in different parts of the world. And with programming, it's highly possible. Like what we do is all algorithms. And it's it's designed, it's interfaces and UIs and stuff. But it's like everything we do these electronic whiteboards in online meetings. And we do JAD sessions where we'll have like 5 or 10 people working on something in real time. A
Yeah.
programmer actually doing code, a tester, a QA person on, a UI person on. UI guy does the change, does a Java change, and then somebody goes in with the back end change, and then they actually watch it flow through with the tester and look at the reports, look at the downs. They get to see the whole thing in real time. So we can
That's
actually
actually my favorite way to work. Like if I'm unless I'm working alone on a project where I'm just doing, I actually love that. And I love it when it's not training, because a lot of what's happening in my company right now is we train someone to do something, so we're kind of doing it with them. But I love it when, so my executive assistant has been with me for, oh my gosh, almost 3 years now. She's amazing. And like she and I will get on, and the two of us will just be like, okay, I'm writing the email. And she'll be like, okay, I'm writing the zaps. And then I'll be like, okay, I think this part's done. She'll be like, okay, I'm moving it over to Monday.com. Okay, I'm moving it over to Kajabi. Okay, I'm moving it over to GHL. And so like then the two of us like get all the software and everything. That is a beautiful thing. There is a beautiful flow to that when you can have a team that can do that.
yeah, it's just there's a lot of synergy that we found. It used to be because I'm a child of the '70s. I would be in an office, my programmer is like sitting right next to me. My UI guy sitting next to me. The Q, we're in the same row. We're in the same area. And we would just be in there and have a whiteboard on the aisle and we jump on it. But we can do all that virtually now.
Yeah.
And the thing is, one guy might be in India, one guy might be in Canada, one might be in the US. But we're all doing the same thing we used to do when we were in that queue. We're in an aisle, kind of
Mhm.
talking over the desk. And we find that we actually work more. That like we work longer hours than we did in the office.
I think my team would tell you the exact same thing, because we have a full virtual team as well, and everybody's everywhere. We have someone in Spain, several in the Philippines, like I mean, all over the United States. And I would say, because we don't tell anyone what time to work, like everyone can work whenever they want. So if we have like night owls who like to work, that's great. We have morning people, they work. Um, but I do think I think people work harder and faster at home, like because we're kind of like, okay, we're just getting it done. And I also think, and I don't know how big the company you work for is, but we're kind of a smaller team. There's only we have 14 people on the team, and so because we're a smaller team, everything we do matters, right? Like every single thing everybody does really contributes to the overall. It's very stressful to me as the CEO, because I'm kind of like, oh, did we drop any of the balls, right? Because like all the little things going on. But I also think it's a really beautiful thing because everybody knows they're important. Like everybody knows that the piece they play is really important.
Right, it's just interesting. Yeah, my team is. I have in a bigger company, but it's like we figured out. You know, we were doing some of this stuff before COVID, that we can be more efficient, because we get pinged, and I can jump on something like right after this. If somebody pings me, I could jump on something and it has something like right now, like later. And it's like you used to have to like, oh, I gotta fly there, I gotta drive there, I gotta get an Uber. It's like all that is gone. So if I need to check something, I can check it like right now.
Yeah.
So that's like, those type of efficiencies. Some people might be, oh, well, you can't be efficient. Like there's a lot of stuff we can do
Yep.
that's faster and better, and we can immediately like stop a problem, like right now. And so
Yeah.
I think it's just it's a modern technology. It's like where we are today with our tech. We're just able to talk like we're talking now, and
Yeah.
I think it's like a community. It's like a community thing where now the teams are so open that like they're international teams.
Mhm.
They're like cross coast. Somebody could be in LA, someone could be in New York. Somebody I've dealt with people in Japan and Australia, in Netherlands. It's like you can deal with people and you get different perspectives, and it's really interesting. How you can learn from the different business models coming from different countries or different cultural perspectives. And to me, that's always super interesting.
Yeah, I actually think it's the thing that's making companies better, or I hope it is anyway, because before, when you could only pull from your local, that meant you could only pull a certain amount of talent. Now, if you are a company that really wants to grow and is very talented, you can pull, like my design suite lead is in North Carolina. My admissions lead, she's in Washington State. Like, I mean, like I wouldn't have found either one
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah. You can get the right person for the right job, not based on location.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a
And
really
so,
beautiful thing.
and that is so cool because it also like builds a community, because a lot of times, like, when you get to these, like, people who should be working together, now you have less barriers
Yeah.
to the right talent being able to do it. It's not like somebody like in Mumbai and somebody, that's in Germany and somebody in Australia, that now they can actually do it like without having to wait to get their visa.
Yeah.
They can actually get on the project and start doing it now. And I'm like, wow, that's so cool to be able to like be able to access that talent pool. And it's just like it is a learning experience for everybody,
Yeah.
to learn the accents, learn the culture, learn the lingo. It's just really cool to me to actually have that level of diversity in terms of the thinking. Like when you talk to somebody that's like from China or Japan, the Eastern thought versus Western thought. I
Yeah.
actually lived in Tokyo for 2 years, and there's a significant difference in kind of way you think about things,
Mhm.
and the way you discuss things, and in the way you read things. Because the way the Japanese language is compared to the Western, English language, how you interpret what they write is a totally different. I learned over time, like it's
Well,
really
it
different.
contributes to more than people realize too, because this is going way, way back. So, but when I finished my doctorate was all on short-term memory and like types of things that we remembered under 7 seconds. So it was like it was quick fixes. And it's so funny because the hypothesis was that people would remember realistic items that were the right color. Like, so they would remember a red apple better than a blue apple because it's a faster, quicker, like memory jog. Um, Guess what we found out? Very little has to do with color and the actual object. Everything in Western culture has to do with placement on the screen. So the thing that everybody remembered the best was whatever was in the left hand top corner, which is the way we read, right? And
Yeah,
so I would be so curious, like if I had gone on to just do research, if I hadn't started my design business, if we had run those same types of tests on Eastern cultures, if we would have found
yeah,
something completely different. But it
yeah.
was
You
just
might.
interesting because we were running all kinds of tests on like 250 people, like to figure out what was going on with short-term memory. And it was number one. And that's why, and our research even showed it, that the best place for your logo is the top left-hand corner of a website because it is
Oh,
the
wow.
place that everyone will remember. And we
Wow.
weren't even looking for that information. We were looking for something totally
Something
different.
different, and you found it out. That is really interesting because, like, when I was in Japan, what I learned is, like, the characters, like the Japanese characters and Chinese, like, hiragana, katakana, and kanjis. Well, the kanjis, they're these, very intricate characters that actually kind of have a history of actually representing things. Like, for kawa actually looks like a river. The kanji for kawa, which is like, a Japanese word for a river, it looks like a river. So a lot of these languages, like, they have aspects to them with Chinese and Egyptian languages, and they have these pictograms, they're part of the characters rather than like letters in an alphabet. And so the meaning that you get from these kanjis is different as soon as you see it compared to like letters.
Mhm.
And so it actually invokes different perspectives. And I'm like, wow, it's just that it alone causes like a different level of thinking. When you
Mhm.
look at like the documents and things, it's like it's just a different perspective.
Yeah, and it's clearly learned. So, because like I'm half Chinese. My mom's Chinese, and I watch a lot of Korean shows, but I think like a Westerner because I like she will say something, and I'll be like, what are you saying, mom? And she's thinking about it a little different than me because she's actually from Malaysia. She's ethnically Chinese, but she's from Malaysia. And that's even different than when I went to mainland China, the way they think. It's just very fascinating.
Yeah, I just love, like, in terms of like the art of it, because my
Mhm.
daughter got like a lot of Shinto aspects, and she went to a Japanese kindergarten and preschool. So her art style is very much like Japanese kind of Shinto culture, is like like, seven-tailed, nine-tailed foxes and all kinds of
Yes.
spirit animals.
The nine-tailed fox, always. Yeah.
It's all over her work, dragons and all kinds of mystical, spirit animals. Like, it's all through her work because that's kind of what she learned as a kid. That's what she saw. She wasn't in an American school. She got a Japanese school from the beginning, and
Yeah, I love that.
it's a totally, and it kind of puts her in a different space as an artist because she has a lot of these Japanese and Chinese, like, motifs in her art.
Yeah, and the way they use
And
it is different than the way we think of art too. And the way it's in their culture is different than the way we have animals and stuff like that in our culture. It's just different. And I can't quite explain it, but it is just different.
yeah, it's a different mindset. It's a different cultural mindset. But I think it's just really cool that you're able to take your passion and then apply it as a teacher or mentor, and actually lift like other boats, like we've been saying. And you've got your design course here, and then I think I also have your other websites. Is there
Yeah.
a difference
I
between the
think
two
just go
different
to
links?
carinagardner.com. That'll be easier than that one, but it'll take you to the
That's
same
it.
place. I do have something that maybe some of your listeners would want for free. If do you want me to just give that to them?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So we have a brand new class, master class that goes with the Make Art That Sells book. I'll totally give it to you guys for free. So all you have to do is go to makeartbook.com. And if you go to makeartbook.com, it's just www.makeartbook.com. If you click on the master class, if you put in the code make art, it will zero out the cost of that class and make it free for you. So if you want to take the masterclass, if you want to get the book, great. It's on Amazon. There's a link for that there as well. But like the masterclass, totally free. And I'm going to talk you through the formula that we use to make art that really sells. And I actually think your daughter should do it. I think it would really help her.
Oh, wow, that's cool. Yeah, I'll let her know. But yeah, it's awesome to be able to talk to people. That's one of the things we tell people to, click on the links we provide to get a deeper perspective of who we talk to. You just mentioned another link, and maybe send that through the private channel, add it to the overall
Oh, yeah. Here, I'll do
podcast.
that.
Yeah, and I can actually put that up before we end tonight. I can just throw that up so people have this other one. So let me grab that and just get it in real time and put it out here. So let me do that as we're talking and then get it out here.
And you guys are going to figure out I'm very
There it is.
practical as a designer. Yeah, there you go. Makeartbook.com. I'm so practical as a designer. Like I believe in the process, but I also think there are things you can do to make the process easier. And lots of times people are like, feeling stuck and they're not making money. And a lot of it's because they're just missing one little thing. And we do this formula. It's like, are you missing the sales vehicle? Okay, here are the 4 sales vehicles, and this is what you have to do. Are you missing like your special mix to create style, which it's medium, theme, and product? If you don't have that special mix kind of nailed down, then it's going to be hard to develop style so that people can see who you are as an artist so that you can create brand. So there are lots of little pieces, and we show you how to do it. We show you how to put in your own mix to make it even better so that you're like kind of figuring it out. But being a creative doesn't have to be a mystery, and making money doesn't have to be a mystery either. So hopefully you have a chance to take that course because it's really fun.
That's awesome. I think that a lot of the creative people who are, fans and guests on the show will, can take heart to what you're talking about. And a lot of, people are kind of cross genre, like a lot of musicians, they dabble in art and they might be interested in this. And a lot of actors, they dabble in art and they might be interested in like trying to refine it because it's all part of the same. Like they get into the project of what they're doing and they want to have an artistic like expression to get into. So learning how to get to be better at marketing is always better. Is always a good idea as an artist.
Yeah,
So,
and a lot of it really does translate. Like I mean, we've been talking about 2 different things, music and design, but almost all the principles are basically the same. You have to create volume, you have to spend time in it, you have to produce, you have to put effort in. There's like certain things that you have to do on a daily or weekly or monthly basis to ever make any, real progress as that creative type.
I really stand by what you're saying. I think it makes a lot of sense, and you've been able to do it. So that's why we love to have people on the show. They're authentic. Like you're a CEO. You're actually you're in business. You're profitable. This is the kind of episode that we like to present to show people like you can do it. And and it's not as much a mystery when you have people like yourself that are willing to kind of give up the secret sauce. And so that's cool.
The secret sauce is that it's not very sexy and it's doing it every day. That's what the secret sauce is. And just enjoying yourself, right? In the process.
Well, I want to thank you again for being a guest on the Family Electric Ghost podcast, and we appreciate it. And we were live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and we'll be on a bunch of other platforms. We're on all the major platforms where you can view or listen to a podcast, and that will make that available to your audience through a landing page tomorrow. And I thank you again for being a guest on the show. Have a good rest of the evening.
Thanks, guys.